Hi, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to show you a unique hand management style racing game by the name of Marco Polo. This game was published in the United States as Marco Polo Expedition. It has similar box art, but it just says Expedition on it as well. The game is for 2 to 5 players, and it plays in about 30 to 45 minutes, ages 8 and up. It was designed by Reiner Knizia, and I'm going to take a moment to show you the rules, and then I'll come back here and give you my final thoughts on it. Okay, so here I've set up a 3-player game for Marco Polo Expedition. And so in this game, players are going to be controlling these caravans, which are represented by these camel figures, as they move across the desert, across the Himalayas, into China, and starting at the city of Hormuz, then going to Kanchu, where there's going to be an intermediate scoring across the desert, into Daidu, where the game will end when one of the figures reaches that point. So this game is generally a hand management game that's card driven, and each player is going to get dealt at the start of the game 5 cards, and these cards come in 5 different colors, and they have 2 features on them: the color of the card and then also the symbol on the card. There are goods cards, which are represented by one of 4 symbols. So we have pottery, cloth, there are spices, and then there is also fruit, which looks something like that. So there's those 4 types of good cards, and then there are also these caravan leader cards, which come in the same 5 colors. So players will also get scoring, or a player color marker, which is a card which has on the back how to pay the costs for the various spaces on the board as you're going to move across the board. This is in German, but I was able to find cheat sheets in English. They will also get this, which is a treasure chest, and you might be able to see here it has 3 bands on the top. That is its value. These function as currency, so you can make change. There's a supply of them, and they have a number written on the inside. You kind of have to hold it up to the light or have it in the exact light to see that, though. Really, the most reliable way to tell how valuable it is by counting the bands. So on a player's turn, they're either going to move or not move, and then draw a card. And there is this display of cards. There's a face-down pile and 5 cards that are face-up. A player could draw from the face-up cards or choose one that is face-down. So the way that movement works in the game is that the player, let's say the red player is the start player, and they will be beginning here, and then the second player will begin 1 space ahead of them, and any subsequent players will begin 1 space ahead of that. The red player, to move into the next space, they would go here, because you can never occupy the same space as another camel. So the next available space here, it has a cost associated on it, and you can see it's a star. And on our cheat sheet, we can see that a star requires any goods card of any color and not a caravan leader. So this would be red's hand, and they would have to pay one of these cards to move forward. So this is a goods card, this is a goods card, this is a goods card. So what the player has to do then is look and see if they want to pay one of those, and they can move multiple spaces on their turn as long as they have the cards to cover the costs. So they might just, for example, pay that 1 card there, and then the next space also has a star on it, so they might want to pay another goods card. And then the next space, this has 2 blank cards on it, so that requires this says 3 cards of the same color, but that has 2, so it's any 2 cards of the same color. So if the red player wanted to, they could also play these 2 cards to move up ahead another space. So it'd be 1 caravan card, or 1 goods card for that space, 1 goods card for that space, and 2 cards of the same color for that space. Now the trick is, this is going to be a very expensive move, because on your turn, at the end of your turn, you'll only draw back 1 card, regardless of how many cards you've drawn. So the next space that they would need to move on requires 2 goods of the same type. Then after that, they're going to need 2 caravan leaders. They already have 1 caravan leader, so they might want to take another one while it's available, and the card will flip up, and that would end their turn. Now for the green player here, who's now in the back of the caravan, they could hop the blue player by playing 1 card, and then there's a special action that they could take on their turn, and I'll show you that in a moment. So the way that this would work is they could play 1 card to move up, And at any time in their turn, as long as they're not leading the pack or the caravan of camels, they could turn in one treasure chest. So they start with this 3 treasure chest. They might want to turn that in. And they could take change. Again, they could take 2 single, 1-band treasure chests. And that will allow them to move 1 space. They can only do that once per turn. I'm sorry, it was the green player. They can only do that once per turn. And they cannot do that if they are already leading. So they would not, the red player right now would not be able to spend a chest to move up ahead. But that would mean they don't have to pay the costs. They just turn in the gold. But those golds are going to be your victory points, and this is a tight scoring game. So this is going to keep going from round to round. At that, let's say that ended their turn, they would then choose another card. They would need 2 goods of the same type for the next space. So they might want to collect one of these bags of seeds, or one of the or spices, I suppose, or a jug. Let's just say they take a jug. So that would be the blue player's turn, and they would have to pay goods to move forward. So they might, for example, pay 1 good to move 1 space, then 2 goods of the same type. So these 2 plums. So the 1 good being this, the 2 goods of the same type being those 2, and then they would get to move to the front of the caravan. They don't have 2 leaders, so they might want to take a card that is a leader for their next turn. So that would be a full round of the game, and the game would just keep going back and forth like this, with players playing the various cards. So you'll notice, and let me move these cards out of the way for the sake of showing you. You'll notice that some of these spaces have on them these treasure chests. And the way that those treasure chests work is that the first player to move on each of those will get to pick them up. So there is some incentive to stay as the leader of the pack. But over the course of the game, people are going to keep playing these card costs to move forward. And I'll just show you what the various card costs are on this cheat sheet. So these starred symbols mean that the player is going to move ahead if they could turn in a set of like goods of that number. So sometimes just 1, sometimes it would be up to 3 or 4 for the very last space of the same type of good. The color doesn't matter, and not caravan leaders. There is this symbol here, which is just a set of 1 of each type of goods, so the 4 different types of goods. This is a set of 2 different caravan leaders. There's several spaces that require 1 or 2 caravan leaders. There are spaces that require 2 or 3 cards of the same color. And then there's 1 space on the board that requires a card in each of the 5 different colors. And those could be either type of card. So the players are going to keep moving it by playing those cards, and sometimes players will get stuck for several turns drawing cards without any player really being able to move. Until, like I said, if a player would move onto a space like this, they get to pick up the chest. And then you'll notice that these spaces here leading up to Khonshu, the mid-game point, have numbers on them. So let's say the players are moving. This player makes a big move, and then green reaches the city first. So the way that it works once a player reaches the city is every player is going to get a payout as of the number of gold that's shown on the space that they're on. So green for getting there first would get 6, blue would get 5, and red would get 3. All the players would move to Khonshu, and then the player next in turn order would begin. So that's a bit of a catch-up mechanism. Let's say when that scoring happened that red was still over here. First, green would get 6 points, blue would get 5 points. They would both move here. And then as soon as red advanced to one of the first space with a number on it, they would move to Khonshu. Also, when you move to Khonshu as the leader, you are required to end your turn there, and because of the scoring round. You can't keep going on. That does end your turn. Normally, you can move as many spaces as you have cards to move. And then the second round of the game will begin, and it's similar to the first round of the game, except that the card combinations are slightly more demanding. And you can see here some of the examples. So for example, 4 cards. Here's 5 card requirement, all in different colors, 4 different good types. That's 4 of the same good type. And the game similarly, it has more chests for people staying in the front. And then there will be a similar scoring round triggered at the end of the game. So let's say now red's made a comeback and they've made it to the end. They would get 7 points for being the first there. Then green here would get 5 points, and blue would get 4 points. After that scoring, You're going to tally up all the chests that you've collected over the course of the game. The person with the most chests is going to win. In the case of a tie, the person who is closest to Daidu will be the winner. Okay, so that is Marco Polo Expedition. The game, it doesn't seem like much on the surface. It seems like you're just collecting cards at random, but really it requires you to do a lot of planning and planning for contingencies. Because of the unique way that the players move, with them hopping over one another, you might be planning for the space immediately ahead of you, but then if one of your opponents leapfrogs you, all of a sudden the cards that you need are going to change drastically because you're not playing for the next space any longer. Because of that, the game definitely rewards tactical decision making and reading your opponents and sensing how they might be moving, and then trying to swing the timing in your favor. The luck of the draw is obviously a factor. There are definitely times where the game might slow down when players are all just trying to get that one last card that they need to move on, and it might be a different card for each player. But it's really, that luck is spread equally across all the players, so it doesn't feel like a game that punishes you exactly due to luck. What's interesting about the cards, too, is that they have two characteristics. They have both a color and a symbol on them. So in some games like Ticket to Ride, for example, it's a similar rummy-style board game where you're going to be trying to collect sets of like colors, but there you are only really worried about the color of the card. Here, having two different card dynamics gives you considerably more to think about. You'd be actually surprised how much you have to think when you're picking which card you want, because you want to ideally take a card that might work for one or two future spaces instead of just the immediate next space, because of what I just talked about. Because of that, the game, it almost, like I said, it does remind me of Ticket to Ride, not just in the card play, but also in that you're trying to create sets of cards that are going to specifically allow you to place a piece on the next spot, which is how the route building works in that game. Although, because of the way that the players move, and because of the fact that those demands are always changing, it seems like the game is almost like in Ticket to Ride, you sometimes have your route blocked by people and you have to take an alternate route. And for some people, that's where the heart of the competition of that game lies, and what makes it more than just, an easy family game and something that could be truly competitive. For other people, that's just something that drives them bonkers. They hate when they get blocked in Ticket to Ride and have to alter their plans. For the latter group of people, maybe this Marco Polo Expedition would not be the game for you. But for the people who like that kind of thinking on your feet and that kind of tactical planning, and combined with some slightly longer term strategy in the cards that you're drafting, this is really going to be a great next step. I think this is a game that requires a little bit more thinking than Ticket to Ride, at least the basic version of Ticket to Ride, and it's in some ways more rewarding. It plays in about a similar amount of time, and rules wise it's not much more complex than that. One of the great features of the game, I think, is that it has that catch-up mechanism where you could spend a gold to hop up a space if you're not the leader. But at the same time, if you do that, you're giving up a victory point. And in this game, the victory points could be very tight. I've had games with three players of this tie, where each player had like 15 gold at the end, and the tie was just broken by the player who happened to make it to that last space. So giving up a gold is not a decision to be taken lightly. It could take you out of the game. So, it's like I said, it's a game that has extremely simple rules, but it does give you plenty to think about. You're likely to remain engaged in it the whole game. I've played with people who have just tried to collect whole sets of cards and make huge runs at the game, which seems like a great strategy at first, but then the other two players who are working in tandem, leapfrogging spaces for one another, will slowly catch up and overtake that player. So it's full of subtle strategies, and I think it's a fun game to explore. So I guess I'll leave it at that, and those are my thoughts on Marco Polo Expedition, and thank you for watching.